have with me here a stack of 6 physical books that I read. I also listened to 2 on audio. The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue, I think that's how you pronounce her name, and then The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. And I'm very happy to report that I either liked or loved everything that I read in November. Especially with the audiobooks, it feels like the spell or the curse has been broken. I loved both of those books. If you are new here, then the way that I normally structure the videos is I will go basically from my favorite book of the month to my least favorite. It's very tricky to put them in that kind of order because I really genuinely had such a good reading month. It probably was my best reading month so far this year. I think it's safe to say. But let's get into it and start with our very first book. This is also my first coffee of the day, so I'm not quite, I feel like, all there yet. I'll try to drink it as quickly as I can so my brain can catch up. So I do not normally give classics a star rating because who am I? But if I were to give star ratings, I would give 5 super enthusiastic stars to Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I don't know if it's surprising that I haven't read this book. It kind of is surprising to me because I've watched the movie, the 2005 version with Keira Knightley. It was one of my mom's favorites. Seriously, she'd watch it over and over again. So I feel like I've read the book, but I really had it, and I'm so glad that I did. I was so captivated and immersed in this world that Austen created, and I'm very excited to talk about it. And if you watched my vlog and you're questioning whether my husband, who had not heard of Wuthering Heights, has heard of Pride and Prejudice, I'm glad to say that he says that he has. In Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen immediately drops you into this 1800s Regency era England where it's like nothing much is happening. It's a lot of letters, it's a lot of walking, it's a lot of carriage ride and sitting around in these drawing rooms. But the emotional turmoil, the gossip, and the sort of social dynamics propel this story forward. We're following Elizabeth Lizzie Bennet, who is witty, she's stubborn, she's kind of allergic to nonsense. She is navigating her very chaotic family, the pressures of marriage, and her own very strong opinions, particularly about one Mr. Darcy, the stoic, the taciturn. He's a very tough hang, at least at the beginning of the book. The plot here is really spinning on the fact that the Bennet family home is entailed, which just means that it can only pass to a male heir. And because the Bennet family has 5 daughters and Lizzie is the second oldest daughter, the problem is that none of them can actually inherit the estate. It's going to pass to their next closest male relative, who is their cousin, Mr. Collins, who is the toughest of hangs, but also really funny. The entailment aspect, though, is just this really clever plot device that is based on something very real, so I don't know if it's fair for me to call it clever. I love the way that Austen worked it in to provide this immediate conflict for the story, because this is what is making all of the energy feel so focused on the girls finding a husband. It has almost nothing to do with finding love. That would be a perk. But the reality is that if they don't find a husband who can provide for them and give them stability, or literally like a roof over their head, they are going to be out on the streets. Mr. Collins can come and claim the estate at any point after their father dies, and they're just basically destitute at that point if they do not have a husband. So there is this underlying tension beneath all the banter. The clock is ticking, and marriage is not just romance, it's straight up survival. It would be so easy to read this book as this kind of frivolous, kind like novel of manners. And it is a novel of manners, and you can read it with that kind of lens and have a really enjoyable experience. But I would strongly encourage anybody who has not read this book and is thinking of it like, oh, it's just about these silly women who are all just trying to find husbands, and want to kind of dismiss it as being just about that, to really look at it through that lens of the economics that are going on at this time, that I think Austen was really trying to shed some light on, but it's kind of buried. And she did it in a really smart way by making this book seem like it's just a romance, and really that just couldn't be further from the truth. You can read it just for the romance, and it definitely rewards that kind of approach, but for me personally, I felt like it was so grounded in that real aspect because it touched on every single thing that's going on in the story. I loved this book all around. Of course, the social commentary, the historical context, the characters. Lizzie Bennet is just she almost has like manic pixie dream girl like shades of that, but she's just so charming. She like leaps off the page, and Austen's prose is, it just like sings. Of course, watching Lizzie and Mr. Darcy go from this mutual misjudgment to genuine understanding is just like chef's kiss. It's perfection. I loved it so much. I did not want to leave this world. And to honor that feeling, I am now reading Persuasion. I just want to stay in Austen's world for as long as I possibly can. It has been well documented on this channel that I have not been getting along with audiobooks, and so to try and remedy that, I decided to listen to The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I actually have the physical book in the house somewhere, but I can't find the book jacket, which is really upsetting because it's a really pretty cover. It's really one of those books that I felt enveloped me, and in that way, I think I use this word a lot, so I don't want to overuse it, but it did feel kind of cinematic, which might have not a little to do with the fact that Tom Hanks was narrating it. So take that for what it's worth, but he does an excellent job. In The Dutch House, we follow Maeve and Danny Conroy. Though the story is told entirely from Danny's perspective, Maeve and Danny are siblings who are living in this grand house when we meet them, and their entire lives are ultimately shaped by this house, which is the titular Dutch house. It is this strange glass-walled mansion that is outside of Philadelphia, and it was their childhood home that ends up attaining this sort of mythic kind of status for them after they're pushed out of the house by their stepmother after their father dies. In the years that follow, the house continues to have this gravitational pull on Danny and Maeve, and so in that way, it almost feels like a character in and of itself in this book. At its heart, this book is really about sibling devotion. It's about memory and inheritance, and how a place can hold such meaning for you that even though there's nothing supernatural going on, it still feels like it has grabbed you or captivated you or holds on to you in some way, because that's where you're channeling all of your emotional baggage or trauma or happiness, anything and everything that kind of comprises a life. It's also about the stories I think that families tell themselves, whether they're true or not, and whether out of love or whether it's out of protection. And in that light, I loved the character of Maeve. We're with Danny, of course, the whole time, but I actually kind of like that because we are only seeing Maeve through Danny's eyes, and he has such tender love for her that you just kind of wish that somebody would see you the way that Danny sees Maeve. Patchett's writing feels very intentional but also effortless at the same time. It's this really beautiful kind of melancholy world, and I think every reader can relate in some way or another to the stories that she's telling through Danny and Maeve and through this Dutch house character. Definitely a 5-star for me. If you have read Bel Canto, a book I've had on my shelf for many years, please tell me if I should pick that one up in 2026, because I loved Anne Patchett's writing so much, and it was kind of a surprise for me. I don't know, I just had it in my head that she's like somebody my mom or my mother-in-law reads, which sounds really mean. I don't know, I just had an idea of her in my mind that, of course, I was proven wrong. So yes, if you've liked Bel Canto, please tell me if I should prioritize that one next year. Okay, here we are. Hi.
Hello.
You know the book Wuthering Heights now?
You're not putting me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm aware of the book, yes.
Good, we can close the loop on this. Thank you. I really loved this book, and I think one of the things I loved the most about it is that it changed my mind, because I really was not getting along with this book at the beginning. I am very open on this channel about liking a book where we have unlikable characters, but this was testing my ability to stand by that statement. But I'm very glad to say that I ended up being totally swept away by this book. I honestly haven't stopped thinking about it since I finished it. So right off the bat, this book feels like the weather. So reading it in November is really ideal, I guess, at least if you live in a place where it gets cold. It's very dramatic and almost unhinged, but in this very strangely compelling, magnetic way. As far as the plot goes, if you don't know, and I was surprised to realize that I didn't actually know the plot, because so much of, I think, what is in popular culture is really just about the first half of this book. So I won't give any spoilers away here, but I will say I prefer the second half over the first half. The story really does, though, center on the wild obsessive connection between Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, who is this foundling boy who is brought into the Earnshaw family when Catherine and Heathcliff are both very young. So they grow up together, and over the years, their relationship becomes really intense. It's basically like a scorched earth thing. Their connection, their bond, their dynamic, toxic as it probably seems to a lot of us modern day readers, and I'm curious if it seemed that way to readers who picked this up more contemporaneous to when it was published, felt this way. Yeah, it really just has this burn it all down for 2 generations that follow. We are moving the entire time between 2 houses that sit on the Yorkshire moors, and the moors are a huge part of setting the scene in this novel, which, by the way, is by Emily Brontë, and I didn't say that at the top. It's by Emily Brontë of the Brontë sisters. The other 2 are Charlotte, who wrote Jane Eyre, and then I think Anne Brontë, who I'm less familiar with. So yes, we're moving the entire time between these 2 estates that sit on the Yorkshire moors. The first one is Thrushcross Grange, which represents order and civility and gentility and all of this sort of properness that was expected at the time. And then we have Wuthering Heights, which is all storm and chaos, and it's basically where you go if you want to like stir-ish up. Catherine and Heathcliff's bond is the spark that sets everything burning. There is pride, there's heartbreak, there's revenge, no shortage of revenge here, and just like a long line of extremely terrible decisions that make everyone in their proximity collateral damage. It feels like they could not care less about that. It's just all about each other, which really, truly, this book is, it feels like a study in how to make a book really compulsive, extremely enjoyable, the kind of book that like sticks to your bones. At the same time, almost every character here is so detestable. I think there's one maybe who I didn't utterly despise, maybe 2, but nobody is without their flaws. It's just it's really hard to find a redeeming quality in them. And Catherine and Heathcliff are among the worst offenders. I approach this book, I feel like, as I have been conditioned to approach it, which is as a love story. And I don't know, don't do that if you haven't read this book. That's my advice. Do whatever you want, obviously. But let me put it this way. Once I changed my approach, once I realized that that's not all that the book is about, and it's not about love, in my opinion, in the way that we might think of it, it became so much richer, so much more enjoyable, and did allow me to get really swept up in the story. Of course, I think I neglected to say at the top that if you don't know, this is a classic Gothic literature book, and we have big Gothic themes to go along with that. Class, no small amount of cruelty, no small amount of revenge. Generational trauma is at play here, and I think the nature versus nurture debate is something to really explore and dig into if that's something you're interested in. On the idea of romance, that love is more elemental rather than something that is just purely sweet and lovely. For me, the pleasure of this book really is in its atmosphere. Sorry, I got distracted by a text. What am I talking about? The atmosphere. Oh my gosh, the moors, the storms, the winds, these like really claustrophobic interiors, and this sense that everyone is being shaped by the landscape, that your personality kind of alters depending on whether you're at Thrushcross Grange or at Wuthering Heights, and what happens to you on the journeys back and forth. It's so like bewitching almost. It's dark, it bears repeating, extremely dramatic, and it's just completely singular. I have only read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. I do have, I think you pronounce it Viette, is that right? By Charlotte Brontë. And I don't know, there is just something about these Brontë sisters. They're so moody. I love it. I feel like if we lived at the same time, I would want to be friends with them. But, you know, we just missed each other by a couple hundred years. The next one is the second audiobook that I listened to in November, and that was The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. I say that like a question because I am always fearful when it's an Irish writer that I'm not pronouncing their names correctly, but I'm going to stick with it, and you guys can correct me if I am mispronouncing that. I am almost immediately intrigued by anything that is Irish and anything that is also coming of age. So this book was a combination of both of those things, and I had heard that it was a really great book on audio. I'd seen the book many times in bookstores and finally decided to listen to it. I loved the narration and the narrator's voice. The issue is, and maybe this is just me, but please tell me if it happens to you, like she had an Irish accent, so then I feel like I start like thinking in an Irish accent, which I'm sure is terrible. But I don't know, does that happen to anybody else? No? Okay, what is this book about? It is really about two friends, Rachel and James. They're in their early 20s living in Cork, Ireland. They meet during the course of this book and they become really fast friends. They end up living together, and the entire time they're struggling, as you do in your early 20s when you have ambitions but almost no resources or means to realize those ambitions, and they're living at a tricky time in Ireland. I feel like it's in the early 2000s. It's at a time when the economy is depressed in Ireland. So finding a job, keeping a job, all of those things are really hard. And they are creatives. So what they want to do is not the easiest field to break into, even in the best of times. Despite all the struggles, they're still having fun because they're in their 20s. And really all they need is each other. Their relationship is the emotional heartbeat of this whole story, even when their life gets messier, when they get pulled into this affair with a married professor. It's really about those intoxicating friendships that feel like the center of the universe when you're in your 20s. And I don't say that in a condescending way, I say it with a little bit of nostalgia. Yeah, when you meet somebody and they're just a friend, but you almost kind of fall in love with them in a way. That time period in your 20s, which can be idealized, but when you're living through it, it's equal parts exhilarating and catastrophic. I so related to Rachel and James. It kind of felt like me and one of my good friends, Tom, when we were in school together in the early 2000s. The entire book is told from Rachel's perspective as sort of this oral history. And through her, I think O'Donoghue is really able to give us this really perfect blend of nostalgia, cringe for sure. There's a lot of cringe in this book, but it's like self-aware cringe, and a lot of tenderness for her characters. The themes really do hit that sweet spot as well of identity, sexuality, friends or friendship as family, and this kind of arrested development that can happen when you're 22, 23 time frame and you're in this no man's land of, are you still a kid or are you still an adult, and you're just trying to figure your way through that time period. I love how it sort of snuck up on me emotionally, because although the story certainly has a lot of serious themes and plot lines, it's really funny. I laughed out loud multiple times, but I also really teared up at the end. Ultimately, it is a story about the people who come into your life at exactly the right, or in some cases, exactly the wrong moments. But this is really a celebration about the people that come into your lives who are meant to be there and who stay with you, who really understand you and see you through everything. It's beautiful, it's fun. and it's very honest. So I really just loved it, and I really can't recommend the audiobook enough. Next, we will pivot to my only nonfiction of the month, and that was Just Kids by Patti Smith. This is Patti Smith's memoir. She has, I think, 3 memoirs currently published, but this probably is her most well known, if I'm not mistaken. Patti Smith is a poet. She is a punk rock icon who I think we can safely say helped define the New York art scene in the 1970s. We are following Patti and the artist Robert Mapplethorpe. They are broke, they are young, they're wildly ambitious creatives who are really just trying to find their place in the world, living in New York City during the late 60s and 70s. They are each other's support system through these early hungry years, and kind of like the characters in the Rachel incident, they meet each other, they have this instant connection, and it is this really intoxicating relationship. But because they're so limited financially, they get to create this place, this kind of almost sanctuary in the places that they inhabit together, where their focus on their art and their art as their identity, the two are just almost inextricable from each other. Their relationship does not fit into a box. They are artists. They are very much of this kind of free spirit, very bohemian lifestyle of that time period. But the fact that their relationship is sort of undefinable, aside from being one about love and respect, is what makes it so special. It's true, pure friendship, it's devotion, it's chosen family, and it's that person who believes in you no matter what and just gets you at your core. Even in some of the slower parts of the book, which I do think that there are, okay, this is not a book that I think is a perfect book, but I loved it nonetheless. So even in those slower parts, I feel like you're still kind of under her spell, and what you get in the end is really worth the wait if you are looking at it like that. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, because the end is really sad, but it does punctuate the entire story that's being told ahead of it. By the end, this memoir becomes a deeply tender tribute to Robert, to his memory, and to the artistic world that Patti and Robert created together. I don't think it would be an overstatement to say that I felt really heartbroken. I actually cried at this book. It wasn't just I teared up. Wasn't weeping, but it was more than a trickle. But I also felt really inspired and genuinely grateful that Patti, wrote the book, and it feels like she is allowing us to feel a part of this strange but really intimate, beautiful world. I should mention that Pride and Prejudice, The Dutch House, and Wuthering Heights were like my absolute favorites. And then these middle 3, I don't really know what order to put them in. They're like, yeah, I don't know. So the next book we have is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I do have a copy of it because I had borrowed it from my library, but I just needed to have the book in my collection. Last month, I read my very first Shirley Jackson, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and I really enjoyed it, but I think I enjoyed this one even more. It's becoming very clear to me, what I think is already known and obvious to a lot of people, that Jackson has this absolute mastery of the slow build dread. In this book, we are following Eleanor, who joins a group of strangers who have been invited to spend the summer investigating Hill House. Hill House has a very kind of murky reputation in the town where it is. It is this mansion, this very large, gothic, imposing mansion with a very long, very unsettling history. In my opinion, the brilliance really is in the atmosphere. Jackson does not rely on jump scares. She is not doing any cheap tricks here. Instead, the dread really sort of seeps in sideways. The rooms don't feel right. The doors don't stay shut. The characters themselves are starting to shift in very subtle but really unnerving ways. So in that respect, the terror in this book is almost entirely interior. It's not like in your face. The house feels alive not because it's doing anything dramatic, but because it's amplifying whatever burdens each person in the house is carrying. This is especially true for Eleanor, who is very lonely. She's really uncertain, like not confident in herself, and she is just longing to be a part of something. We have no choice as the audience to just sit back and watch and see how the house exploits those vulnerabilities that she has, and to see how it affects her and whether she will make it through to the other side, whatever that means. The themes in this book are not dissimilar to the ones I talked about with We Have Always Lived in the Castle. We have, again, isolation, identity, unreliable perception, also this thin kind of crumbling line between the supernatural and the psychological. The writing is unsettling, but at the same time, it's really, really elegant. Of course, it is a cornerstone of the Gothic horror genre for that reason. So many books look to this one as kind of a framework of this genre that literally quote the book. I feel like I kept reading this book in other books. So I don't know, is everybody trying to be Shirley Jackson? Maybe, and I can see why. Her restraint is maybe her most admirable quality. You barely notice that like the trap is closing before it has completely snapped shut and you're trapped inside. It's delicious. Okay, we have two left, and they are both coming of age stories, and I enjoyed them both, but I would say less than the other books that I've already talked about. So yeah, let's get into it. The next one up then is Elena Ferrante, The Lying Life of Adults. This is translated by Anne Goldstein, who does translate, I believe, all of Ferrante's work. And I appreciate that because I feel then there's a consistency to the voice and to the translation, which is so important for Ferrante. Her voice is her hallmark. Without it, you're going to lose a lot. So I appreciate Goldstein, and I feel like translators sort of work in obscurity, and it's worth calling out the translators when we have a work of translation. The Lying Life of Adults does feel like very classic Ferrante. It is very sharp, it's intimate, and it is a coming of age about a young girl living in Naples, Italy. And I mentioned this in my last video, but I just love how she writes women. It's not mean, but it is very honest, it's very raw, and it can be uncomfortable sometimes. I see some of myself in these characters, and that's not always a pretty reflection that's being shown back at me. In this one, we are following Giovanna. She is a teenage girl living in Naples. Her family, her mother and father, are intellectuals. You get the sense that she is living in more of an upper class household. It's so strange to say, but I really deeply related to how the conflict in this story is set off because it seems kind of innocuous. Giovanna's world basically cracks open because she overhears her father talking to her mother, and he makes a very uncharitable comment about how Giovanna is exactly like his estranged sister Vittoria. Vittoria, I mean, he has not a nice or kind thing to say about her. And so that comparison, the way that Giovanna interprets it, not unfairly, is to take great offense to it. It really sends her into a spiral, and maybe ironically, it kind of almost slingshots her directly into Vittoria's arms. She wants to meet her. She wants to get to know her. She wants to understand, I think, why her father would make this comparison at all. Regardless, she is sent into Vittoria's world and her like magnetic orbit of where she lives, which is in Naples, but it's like the rougher, lower class side of town. Giovanna herself is two parts. She's looking for someone to set an example for her, to tell her who she is and how she should be in the world. But as the story unfolds, the question really becomes, who among these people can really set that example for her? Ferrante just does this teenage girl consciousness so well. It's a combination of utter boldness. I mean, Giovanna is very bold, but it is so hampered with her rampant insecurity. As far as the coming of age story goes, this is one that is really rooted in shame, in desire, in class differences, and in betrayal, in the way that families create their own myth through the lies that they tell not just other people, but each other in order to maintain whatever sense of decorum or status that they're hoping to keep. And to just be a little bit more romantic. It's very hard to write a book about Italy, even Naples, even like maybe the less desirable part of Naples, and not feel captivated by it. And it just makes you want to go visit Italy and live in this world as well. It's just, I don't know how you make Italy seem unappealing. And certainly every time I read one of her books, I just like want to book a trip there immediately. Okay, my coffee is now cold, but I only have one more book, and that is Either Or by Elif Bachman. This is the sequel to The Idiot, and while I did enjoy Either Or, I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as The Idiot. Part of what made The Idiot so special for me was Ceylan's voice. She was so fresh and observant and unintentionally hilarious. She's like this like brilliant little alien. And I mean that in the extraterrestrial way, not in the other way. But yeah, she's like this little weirdo wandering around the Harvard campus during her freshman year in The Idiot. And Either Or is still very much that person, but she's older and she's trying very hard to mature. She is still characteristically very clumsy about her process of evolution, but the way that she goes about it in Either Or isn't quite as charming as it was in The Idiot. And maybe that's to be expected. When you grow up, it's not always going to be adorable. She's really attempting to model her life after the literature that she's reading. And all of these, grand philosophical frameworks are what she's drawing from. And it leads her into this, it feels like never ending series of awkward, often really misguided experiments with adulthood. Okay, guys, I'm sorry, my camera died. And so now I have to finish on my phone because I need to finish this today. I think I know where we left off. I'm just in general, Ceylan in this book, she's very focused on chasing, what's a better way to do this? Yeah, she's very focused on chasing experience and chasing meaning. She's not letting it come to her. She's just trying to be the kind of person that she thinks that she should be. But Bachman's humor is still there, and that very characteristic, I think, deadpan delivery is still very present. The way that Ceylan narrates even the most mundane experiences is so still very charming. It's just less of that, I think, in this book than we had in The Idiot. I think just because I love the character so much, I still think that this is a worthy follow-up. Did we need it? I don't know that I would necessarily say that, but I would read anything. I will read anything from Elif Bachman at this point. I feel confident saying that. And if she wrote a third and a fourth, finishing out Ceylan's college career, I would definitely just gobble those up. So enjoyable, probably maybe like a 3.25 for me, or 3.5, I don't know, in that range. I think every author I read has been a female author this past month. I do try to at least have a mix. These are just the books that I ended up reading. It wasn't really premeditated at all. As far as what I'm currently reading, I am going to stop giving updates on this because I will be reading this book for the foreseeable future, and I'm really behind right now, but I'm still reading Titus Groan of the Gormenghast novels. This is a trilogy by Mervyn Peake. I'll just save it for when I finish the first book, and then we'll carry on that way, because otherwise it's going to get very tedious. It arguably already is for me to keep saying I'm still reading this book, and I mean, that's about as far as I've gotten. Then I mentioned I'm reading Persuasion by Jane Austen. I just started it. I think I've read one chapter, so I will hope to finish that by the end of the month. And then, I don't know what else to read. There's another book that I will be reading for book club. I am leaning towards Butter, and I've heard that it's really good, and I think I have no idea. This author is coming out with a new book at some point in 2026. And then I also really want to read Abigail by Magda Szabo. Finally. I posted about this on my Instagram, which I don't really do a whole lot with my Instagram. It's totally subject to my whims of the day. But I read that the third book in Tana French's trilogy, which started with The Searcher and then As you guys know, I have not shut up about The Hunter and Tana French in general, and this trilogy in general. The Keeper will be coming out March 31st, 2026. I have certainly pre-ordered it, and I am so excited. I'm wondering if I should reread The Searcher and The Hunter. I don't need to, but would it be fun? Maybe. Okay. That was everything. I loved it all, and hopefully we do end the year on a high note. I know I said finally, one more thing. I don't really understand doing like a best of the year books before the end of the year. So I won't be having a video like that until January. I'm often reading up until the last days of the month, so it makes more sense for me to wait until January to do my ultimate 2025 wrap up. Okay, I'll see you guys in my next one, which probably will come out a week after this one is posted. So hope to see you there and then. Bye.